today's video, I want to talk about how you can best answer the interview question, do you have any questions for me? Now, I want to be very clear, this is a definite question that they will ask at the very end, so you do not want to fumble this one. In addition, you want to make sure that you leave a good impression at the end so that you don't ruin all the work that you put in previously. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through how you're to best answer this interview question, in addition to giving you some examples so that in the case where you really have no questions, you can definitely use these few to score higher points in the interview process. So definitely you want to stick until the very end to hear those few questions so that you can finish strong. So without further ado, let's get started. Now, the first thing you need to understand about this question is understanding why they're asking it. And the reason is because what you ask will determine what your priorities are. And by hearing your questions, what they can do is reverse engineer and understand what is it that you're thinking in this conversation. And so that's the first reason. The second reason why they're asking this question is to gauge your interest in this position and the company. And by getting an understanding of where you stand in terms of your interest and whether you're excited or not, or whether you're just kind of like asking the questions and just going through the motions, they get a better sense of, is this a candidate that's excited for the role or just a candidate who's just looking for a job? And if you are the former, awesome. If you're the latter, it's like, well, they would probably want to go with someone who is actually interested in the role and the position. So that's another consideration. The third consideration is to sell you themselves. At the end of the day, the fit really matters. And if you don't buy into this role, and if you're not interested in it, or if you have doubts about perhaps relocation, about working with this manager or working with the team, they want to alleviate these concerns so that you enter the job knowing what you're getting into, so that there's no complaints in the end and you stick around longer, retention's better, so everyone's happier, right? So it's to really address these three concerns. And these three concerns are really why they're asking this question. So in order to give a good answer, you have to be, number one, very thoughtful about what you're asking. And by thoughtful, what I mean is you need to have done your research and done your due diligence and have listened in the interview process so that you have some good questions saved up to ask. The second thing is to really convey enthusiasm so that they feel comfortable moving forward with you as a candidate. So hopefully this gives you an understanding of why they're asking the question and why it's important to prepare for it. Which brings me to my second point, preparing for these questions. And there's several things that you need to do. Number one, definitely do the research beforehand. And I talk about this in my previous video, how to prepare for an interview, and I'll put it in the cards above. But basically, you need to do the due diligence and the research to get ready for this conversation so that you have something to ask. So for example, if the company is going through a hypergrowth phase and your particular role is central to it, you want to ask this question: what role will this position play in accomplishing the company's goals? And if there are a lot of alignment and it's central to it, then you're going to play a central role to the company's success. And that may mean more career opportunities. That may mean better compensation. That may mean a lot of things. Now, if the company's going through hard times and they just went through a round of layoffs and they're bringing more people on, it's a fair time to ask the question, what's the company's position on this particular role? So getting an understanding of where the company stands and where this role plays in the company's long-term success is important as well. So that's why you really need to do your research beforehand. And something else that you can consider is, based on the questions that they ask you, you can kind of understand where they're coming from and their interests, and you can ask them back. And so basically this allows for a more formal way to have that conversation to understand where they're at. And so based on this, there are several areas that you can generally ask about. You can ask about the culture, whether it's the team culture or the company culture. You can ask about long-term career development opportunities, how you can grow. You can talk about management and leadership styles so that you can get a better understanding of how that leader leads and will you flourish under this individual? And starting to define what success means so that you know what you're getting into. Now, the third part of answering this is to craft your questions. Now that you've done the research and have a ballpark idea in terms of what you can talk about, craft the actual question. And ideally, you do this beforehand. And if it's multiple rounds of interviews, then at each round, you would have gotten some new data points to ask the next person about certain topics from the previous rounds that you could cover. And so there's several elements about this. Number one, it shows that you've been attentive, you've been paying attention, and that you are engaged in the conversation. Number two, you want to convey positivity, and you also want to convey enthusiasm. In addition, you want to convey your expertise, because based on the quality of the question you ask, it could determine whether they think of you as a strong candidate or if you're a middle of the road candidate. The questions really matter in this case. So if you're able to have tailored questions for this specific role, that's ideal. However, if you don't, I've got you covered. Here's 5 questions that you get asked that are frankly somewhat generic, but at the same time, they cover enough bases in that they are well-rounded enough that it would cover everything. So the first question you get asked is, tell me what a typical day or week looks like in this role. And this will really help the interviewer flesh out what this would look like and also give you a better understanding of what you're getting into. A second question you could ask is, how do you measure success in this role? And this question is important because at the end of the day, you want to do well. If you join and in the first 6 months it's not a good fit, then you would have wasted your time, you would have left your previous job, and it would be a huge loss for both sides. So you definitely want to ask this question, how is success measured? How do we know I'm successful in this role? And you can also ask some follow-up questions. What kind of support is there to ensure my success? The third question is, can you tell me more about the team or the people that I'm going to be working with? Now, if you're going through several rounds of interviews, you're most likely going to meet the team. However, if you are not going through multiple rounds, you definitely want to ask this question. In addition, you also want to ask, what are some of the other stakeholders that I'll be working with? Am I working with some neighboring teams? Am I working with people who are in the same role as I am? Or am I going to be working with people who are in a different role? Am I going to be embedded, or am I going to be a central resource? There's a lot of different possibilities in terms of the people that you're going to be working with. So you definitely want to cover that base as well. The fourth question you can consider asking is, what are the company's goals? And how does this role contribute to these goals? And that way you get an understanding of, are you on a core pillar of what this company is doing, or are you somewhat on a periphery? And this has implications in terms of how many resources that this company is willing to allocate to this role, to your team, and so on. So definitely you do not want to miss this one. And the fifth and final question you probably want to ask is either, tell me your management style and how you help people grow on your team, or how do you support your employees' professional development? Right? And this question is probably directed to the hiring manager. So be sure to ask this, because if you end up with a manager who is not supportive of growth, then you probably want to know before you enter this role, because you really want to be landing in a role that's going to help you grow in the long term. Hopefully these 5 questions are helpful to you. Now, the fifth and final thing I want to talk about are the mistakes you want to avoid. And there are several common mistakes that people make. The first mistake is obviously, no, I don't have any questions. You do not want to even go there, no matter how confident you are, no matter how good the process has been, no matter how good the conversation's been. You don't want to talk about, no, I don't have any questions. You want to use up every single last minute and be apologetic about it. And even after the interview ends, you want to have follow-up questions. And in those email questions, you can embed more gratitude, you can embed more enthusiasm, and just clarify certain things so that they know you are serious about the role and that this is a serious conversation. And another thing you can keep in mind is that if you are not a serious candidate for this role, they probably won't be replying your emails. So by having these kinds of follow-up emails and these follow-ups, it will go a long way. Number one, solidifying your candidacy, and number two, keeping you out of being a nervous wreck, because you get a better understanding of whether they're actually interested in you or not. Make sure you ask about 3 or 4 questions in about 2 emails tops. You don't want to go overboard and make them feel like this person is needy, clingy, and annoying. So definitely strike that balance, feel it out yourself to see what works for you. And if you're not sure, feel free to let me know in the comments below what your situation is, and I'll be happy to give my 2 cents on it. The second mistake that people make is asking self-centered questions, asking me questions, right? Asking questions about how you can help me, about how I want more opportunities, how I want to be working on these kind of projects, how I want to, like, you want to avoid any me and I stuff. A little bit's fine, because you definitely need to consider that, but you also want to make sure you put the company's priorities first to really show that you are a team player. That's it. Hope this video was helpful to you. If you like this video, please give it a like, share, subscribe, follow wherever you are. If you have any thoughts or comments, please let me know in the comments below. Hope you have a good one.